Night lay still across a land with no end. The wind slipped through the dark trunks, as if carrying the memory of someone who had walked here long before any human footprint. On the thin layer of snow, tracks larger than any person's held a faint warmth, like a breath not yet finished. There was no growl, no sudden movement, only the sense of darkness opening a door, leading into a place reason could no longer reach. The old ones had many names for that shadow, but all those names pointed to something familiar and distant at once. The darkness within humanity that had never been fully understood. In a young land like America, old stories had barely taken root. There were no centuries of temples, rituals, or unified myths stacked upon one another. Instead, there were open stretches of wilderness, forests untouched by conquest, and mountain ranges standing still, as if watching the newcomers who arrived too late. In that silence, people began shaping a language to name their own fear. It was not a written language, but a silhouette, a towering figure, heavy, draped in darkness, always appearing at the edge of sight. For many, it was only folklore, but to the early communities, it touched something deeper, the sense that nature saw them before they could see it. That intuition shaped the first monster of America, not as a threat to frighten, but as a reminder. Wherever darkness remained untouched, humans were meant to walk slowly. As the settlers pushed through the ancient woods, they carried with them the unease of standing before the unknown. A twig snapping behind them, a large shadow moving through mist, a figure taller than a man but not quite an animal. These fleeting encounters were enough to seed a symbol, even without a clear shape. People understood that something watched from the hidden folds of the forest, as if the land itself held a spirit. America's first monster did not need fangs or burning eyes. It carried silence, and silence became the test, a reminder that the true frontier was not where the map ended, but where humans realized how small they truly were. From that silence, a form slowly rose out of the deep woods, the form of a creature standing in the wild like a guardian of the threshold, a name whispered through generations, a symbol of the land that never belonged to humans. Here, the story widens into the wind, into the trees, and into the footsteps no one can follow. There, the first legend waits, and from that place, the tale steps into forests that know how to speak. In the deep heart of the forest, where sunlight thins into a pale ribbon across the damp earth, that figure stood upright, like part of an ancient trunk. People said it did not step out of the darkness withdrew from it. A towering form, covered in coarse, earth-colored hair, moving slow but certain, as if it were the rhythm of the forest rather than a creature within it. No one had ever seen its face clearly, yet everyone remembered the broad shoulders sinking into mist and the heavy footsteps pressing softly into the soil. They called it Bigfoot, a simple name, but behind its simplicity lay a feeling difficult to name. Bigfoot's presence felt like a doorway into a far-off age, a time before humans set foot on this land, when nature did not share its space with anyone. In the early years of the nation, when the United States was little more than rough edges on a map, Bigfoot became the emblem of what people could not yet explain. No one knew what it was, but everyone knew where it stood, on the boundary between the familiar and the unclaimed. The deep footprints in the mud served as a reminder that the forest was never empty. It had eyes, it had memory, and at times, it followed behind with a steady, unhurried breath. This gave rise to a powerful archetype, the threshold keeper, a being standing between two worlds, guarding the way into the wild so humans would remember they were only guests. Bigfoot did not attack, threaten, or erupt in fury. Its silence was the warning. When a creature does not need to display strength, it becomes clear it belongs to a greater order than our own. The fear surrounding Bigfoot did not grow from danger, but from depth. It stirred an ancient awareness that some things are meant to be glimpsed, never fully understood, and that is why it endures in American memory. It is the shape of a land whose wilderness has never been erased. But the forest speaks in more than one voice. Other places, the damp swamps, the cold mountains, the valleys drowned in fog, each shaped their own silhouettes, as if one spirit wore many faces, still tall, still cloaked in thick hair, but every landscape told a different version of the same unease. To understand that, one must leave the first forest and step into a place heavier, deeper, a place where the darkness does not sit still, but seeps, shifts, and glides across the water as if it were alive. And there, the ancient form changes again. Not every wilderness wears the same face. Leaving the cool western forests, the air shifts, moisture thickens, the ground grows softer, and the darkness here does not sit still as it does in the northern mountains. It moves, slips, clings to the skin like a heavy, sour mist. This is the place where the ancient wild man puts on a new mask. In the swamps of Florida, that silhouette takes another name: skunk ape, still tall, still heavy-footed, yet its presence is foretold not by sight, but by scent, a sharp, pungent odor, somewhere between stagnant water and rotting flesh. For the indigenous peoples, scent is not merely a biological trait, it is a declaration of territory. This creature does not hide, it lets the swamp speak for it. In a landscape where trees grow over one another like a living labyrinth, the skunk ape becomes a reminder that some lands are only passed through, never possessed. If the mountain forest is a realm of silence, the swamp is a realm of concealment. Bigfoot watches from afar, the skunk ape stands close enough to be smelled. And that closeness turns it into another variation of the threshold keeper, a damp, dim, decaying incarnation. Farther north, among the dense woods of Appalachia, the figure shifts its name again. Wood booger. The name sounds harmless, yet the stories are anything but childish. In the memories of the mountain people, the wood booger is the face of the ancient forest, a place where light rarely reaches the ground and the cold follows every step. It is no raging monster, it is a keeper. Children are warned that if they wander too deep at dusk, the wood booger will lead them astray, a quiet reminder that the forest is no place for carelessness. Though given many names, these figures are branches of the same fear, the fear of being swallowed by the landscape, not attacked, but absorbed. Each region shapes its own form, yet all revolve around the same truth that humans are not the center of nature. They are travelers moving through a world that spoke its own language long before they arrived. At the end of each tale, whether skunk ape or wood booger, one quiet question remains. Does the creature change with the land, or does the land create the creature to express its own temperament? That question opens the next door. For when the forest no longer merely watches, but begins to move with the instincts of a hunter, the ancient silhouette shifts once more. This time, not to guard, but to pursue. When the forest moves from stillness to motion, the wild man archetype changes rhythm with it. No longer the distant watcher, no longer the silent keeper. In certain places, the wilderness carries the scent of caution, the pressure of something drawing closer each time a person turns their back. Here, the familiar form of the wild man twists into something else, the pursuer. In Wisconsin, along empty roads cutting through old farmland, residents speak of a figure as tall as a person, its body covered in fur, its face shaped like a wolf. They call it the Beast of Bray Road. Unlike Bigfoot, who survives by maintaining distance, this creature is seen trailing cars or standing in the road as if to block the way. Its eyes, people say, do not blaze, but glow as though something inside them is watching itself reflected in the headlights. For the locals, fear does not come from its shape, but from its intent. The Beast of Bray Road is not passive. It selects, it approaches, and that deliberate motion makes it the first figure in the wild man line defined by a true predatory impulse. Farther north, another legend wears the face of a beast but stands upright, Michigan's Dogman. It does not charge. It does not hunt with claws. Yet the stories revolve around the moment a lone traveler in the woods turns back to find a human wolf figure framed between two trees, silent, as if simply waiting, a waiting without urgency or haste, waiting shaped by a creature that has never lacked time. What connects the beast of Bray Road and the dogman is not their appearance, but the instinctual fear they awaken. Bigfoot makes humans feel small. These two make humans feel chosen, and that is the oldest fear of all, being watched in the dark, without knowing why. On a deeper level, both creatures embody the archetype of the shadow of the hunter, the dark reflection of humanity, where the instinct to chase never vanished, but was merely covered by a thin layer of civilization. People fear them because, in their eyes, we see what we once were before fire, before safety had a name. As the wild man archetype shifts from observer to hunter, the forest ceases to be a quiet, measured place. It becomes a living maze, where every snapped twig may signal something following behind. And from this transformation, the mountain legends change once again, not in form this time, but in sound. When the darkness of the forest has worn enough shapes, legend seeks a different language for fear. Sound, not form, not footprints, but a call stretched across mountain slopes, long, warped, then dissolved into the cold air. A sound not belonging to any ordinary wild creature, yet reaching a very old place in the mind of anyone who hears it. In the Ozarks, people tell of a creature few have ever seen clearly, but many have heard before knowing it existed. They call it the Ozark Howler. Its cry is not merely loud. It is described as something strange and layered, part wolf, part deer's call, ending in a timbre that almost resembles a distorted laugh. The sound never settles. It shifts pitch, as if searching for a frequency that could make a human heart skip. In the deep mountains, where thick fog curls through winding trails, people do not need to see the creature to believe it is watching. The howl alone is enough. This birth of sound in place of shape creates a different kind of monster, the monster of distance. Is it near or far? Calling or warning? The Ozark Howler's cry refuses to clarify anything. Instead, it blurs every familiar reference. The archetype evoked here is the harbinger of unease, the bearer of foreboding, not death, not catastrophe, but an ancient instability. In darkness, humans measure danger through sound. When that sound breaks the rules we know, instinctive fear rises. This howl is also a declaration of territory, not scent like the skunk ape, not heavy steps like Bigfoot or Dogman, but waves of vibration rolling through the valleys, a territory unseen, yet undeniably present. Here, sound becomes an extension of the landscape itself, a way for the mountains to say that this place does not welcome haste. People in the Ozarks claim that when the howl erupts, everything halts. The wind turns, birds fall silent, and the world feels thinner, as though between the ridges, a throat from some distant age is calling, not seeking anyone, but asserting its existence through the dark. From the legend of the Ozarks comes a clear truth. Sometimes a monster needs no face or form. It only needs a sound that wanders into the human ear. And when the mountain's howl begins to shift into the whispered echo of human tragedy, the legend changes again. No longer the call of a wild beast, but the lingering curse, shaped by human hands, where fear no longer comes from the forest, but from failures of our own making. Some legends carry the breath of the forest, some carry the echo of mountains, but there are others that do not rise from soil or trees at all. They rise from human error. When emotion slips beyond its limits, when jealousy, doubt, or fear pushes someone across a sacred line, the monster that emerges is no longer a creation of nature. It is the consequence of a heart distorted. In Cherokee tradition, the tale of the Wampus Cat holds that weight. Not a wandering beast born of the night, but a spirit that was once human, once had a name, once lived an ordinary life before being bound to the form of a half-woman, half cat, roaming like a wound that never closes. The story tells that running deer, consumed by suspicion, followed her husband into a sacred hunting ritual, a ceremony forbidden to women. To conceal herself, she draped the hide of a wildcat over her shoulders, stilled her breath, and melted into the dark. But the sacred cannot be deceived. The shamans sensed an intrusion, not with their eyes, but through the slightest shift of energy in the space around them. Her violation was not simply bold. It touched the foundational law of the community. The punishment passed down through generations claimed that she was fused to the wildcat's skin, transformed into a being caught between human and beast. It was not death. It was an unending life, with the one thing she feared most, her own mind, when no longer anchored to her people. In the mountain shadows, the Wampus cat is not seen as a predator or an outsider. It is a reflection, a symbol of what happens when a sacred boundary is crossed without understanding why it exists. Its archetype is the punished transgressor, a figure changed not for malice but for stepping beyond a threshold the spiritual world does not allow. What separates the Wampus cat from the creatures of the deep woods is simple. It was not born of nature, it was born of regret, and because of that, its legend carries a quiet sorrow, a sorrow with no remedy. Running deer was not cast out by the beasts of the forest, but by a single moment when her heart faltered. Look deeper, and the Wampus cat becomes a reminder that monsters are not always the things hiding outside. Some are the parts of us that become locked away, never returning to their original shape, pieces warped by emotion too strong, arriving at the wrong moment. When a legend wears a human face, fear no longer looks outward, it turns inward. And from that perspective, we enter another realm of folklore, a place where the boundary between myth and evidence begins to blur, as though certain shapes have stepped straight out of story into the waking world. In most folklore, monsters live at the edge of sight, close enough to stir fear, yet distant enough to escape proof. But in certain places, the story does not end with shadows or whispers. It takes a step further. It leaves marks. And sometimes, it leaves a body as if the legend wished to prove it carried weight, skin, and the possibility of being touched. One of the clearest examples lies in the traditions of the Shoshone and other Northern Plains tribes, who speak of a creature called Shunka-Warakin. In community memory, it is a predator resembling a wolf, but not entirely wolf, with an unusually long face and a thick, powerful frame. Since the previous century, ranchers, hunters, and highland settlers have described it as a silent threat, appearing and vanishing within a few breaths. The tale crossed the boundary of folklore when a strange specimen was shot in Montana in the late 19th century. Its body, with its elongated jaws, dark coat, and anatomy unlike any known animal, was taxidermied and displayed in a small shop. It then disappeared for decades, only to resurface unexpectedly in the early 21st century. Although modern science still disagrees on what it is, the mere existence of the specimen makes Shunka-Warak in a rare crossing point, where legend touches reality. Farther east, the Missouri River carries another story. Miniwashitu, a one-eyed water beast with a red body and spines sharp as stone. For the Mandan and Sioux peoples, Miniwashitu is not merely a monster, it is the essence of wild water itself. Tradition says that whoever sees it will face misfortune or drown, not because the creature attacks, but because the river expresses its temperament through it. They call it a current with intent, where death arrives not by accident, but as a natural response from an ancient force. Though it has no physical specimen like Shunka-Warakin, Miniwashitu persists through a striking consistency in description. Large, red-bodied, single-eyed, dwelling in murky depths, surfacing only when the river's spirit shifts. This reveals another form of evidence, social evidence. When many independent communities preserve the same image across generations, that image stops being a lie or illusion. it becomes collective memory. Both creatures stand on the charged, ambiguous frontier between story and the tangible. One has a real body, the other has a unified tradition, and both suggest that in vast, untamed landscapes, humans do not merely face nature, they face the forms nature borrows to express its will. From this threshold, legend fades into a darker territory, a place where monsters no longer have clear names or stable shapes, where only questions remain and fear is born from the very impossibility of naming what waits in the shadows. Some creatures have clear forms, some leave tracks, scents, or calls echoing through the trees, but there are legends that give no face, no body, no outline at all. Instead, they leave something else behind, pure ambiguity. And that ambiguity opens a deeper, more ancient fear, the fear that cannot be defined. In the jagged, wind-scarred lands of the Badlands, the Lakota speak of a presence called Taku-He. The name itself is not a description, but a question. Taku, what? He, who? A being that even its witnesses refuse to name or shape, because each person sees it differently. Some stories say it looks human but impossibly tall and thin, as if its joints do not match where bones are meant to meet. Others describe it as the stretched shadow of something trying to rise from the earth but never completing its form. Some claim it does not walk on 2 legs, nor 4. Instead, it drags its entire body across the broken ground, leaving behind a narrow, sunken groove, as though the soil collapses under the weight of darkness itself. And there are those who insist they have never truly seen it. They have only felt a slight compression in the air, as if the space around them tightened. A burst of wind, despite a still sky. A silence that feels engineered rather than natural. Signs not enough to define a creature, yet enough to set human instincts on edge, like invisible bowstrings drawn tight. The archetype of Taku-He is neither predator nor guardian. It belongs to a rare category, the undefined fear, the terror without a form, allowing the mind to shape its own threat. People fear most what they cannot look at directly, because when nothing is defined, everything becomes possible. A specific monster has limits. A formless one allows infinite outcomes. The Badlands are the perfect cradle for such a legend. Fractured ridges, deep hollows, sharp cuts in the earth that look torn by wind itself. In this landscape, every movement is easy to misread. A rolling stone becomes a figure, a mountain shadow shifting at dusk becomes a watcher, the terrain becomes a mirror, and Taku-He becomes the reflection of truths people do not want to speak aloud. When a monster lacks a fixed body, folklore does not describe it as a character, but as a condition, a state of being that anyone entering that land can feel before they understand it. From this unshaped fear, American folklore turns toward another domain, where form returns to humanity, but the face is twisted by tragedy, where the monster does not come from the dark, but from a wound in the human soul, a wound that shapes itself into a body. Some monsters carry the weight of the forest, some rise from stone and wind, but there are legends in which the creature's form does not come from the land at all. It comes from a fracture in the human heart. When loneliness grows too vast, when abandonment unravels one's sense of self, the boundary between human and beast thins until a single misstep can reshape a soul forever. Along the shores of Mobile Bay in Alabama, people tell of the wolf woman of Mobile, a figure both familiar and foreign, half woman, half wolf, appearing on damp, quiet nights when the wind carries the scent of salt and the memory of old stories. The legend does not begin with deep woods or divine creation. It begins with something far more human, a woman betrayed. In one version passed down, she was young, proud, and beautiful, yet her heart was left untended by a husband, consumed by luxury and indulgence. Seeking a way to reclaim his attention, she turned to a mysterious figure sometimes called a witch, sometimes simply one who knows the forbidden and begged for the ability to become what her husband admired most, a powerful hunter, free, returning from the wilderness with triumph in hand. But wishes never unfold the way humans intend. The transformation came, but it did not stop. Her skin stretched, her legs folded into the joints of an animal, and the once beautiful face merged into a wolf's muzzle. Her voice dissolved into a strangled growl. She tried to run back to the shape she knew, but her body had locked itself into something irreversible. Only her eyes remained human eyes, trapped in the face of a beast. The wolf woman does not hunt. She does not attack villages or stalk travelers like the dogman or the beast of Bray Road. Instead, she wanders the edges of the city, down quiet roads and along the water's edge, as though searching for something lost. Those who claim to have seen her say the first thing they felt was not fear, but a gentle ache, as if her sorrow leaked through her gaze and drifted into the night. Her archetype is the broken identity, a soul caught between two natures, belonging fully to neither. Her terror does not lie in claws or form, but in the suggestion that any one of us might slip from our own boundaries if the pain becomes too great. The wolf woman is a creature shaped by suppressed emotion, by the longing to be seen, and the wound of being forgotten. Her story does not warn people away from forests or lonely roads. It makes them think about the fragility within themselves. From this sorrowful legend, American folklore moves toward another kind of monster, one not born from personal grief, but from the modern collective, shaped by rumor, replication, and the amplifying force of mass communication. The dawn of a new creature approaches, its face shifting with each region and every era. Some creatures are born of forests, mountains, and water, but others live a second life, shaped by something invisible that modern humans created, the media. When rumor spreads like mist, when blurred images repeat again and again, fear can fashion a new body, one completely different from the original. Nowhere is this more evident than in the tale of the chupacabra, a creature that has lived two lives in two different worlds. In the 1,990 seconds in Puerto Rico, stories of livestock drained of blood sparked a wave of alarm. Witnesses described a two-legged figure, thin-bodied, with glowing red eyes and a ridge of sharp spines along its back, like something not quite of this earth. It did not roar or tear its prey apart. Instead, it left neat puncture marks, a behavior less like a predator and more like something examining, sampling, or harvesting. This image spread quickly, not through traditional oral storytelling, but through newspapers, radio, and eventually television screens. The original Puerto Rican chupacabra was therefore more than a monster. It became an emblem of a tense era, a time when people feared that new forces were entering the physical world. Genetic manipulation, uncontrolled experiments, or even interference from other dimensions. Its fear was not natural, it was technological, cultural, and modern. Yet when the legend crossed the sea and reached the American South, it changed. In Texas, the chupacabra took on an entirely different shape. Four-legged, grey-skinned, hairless, gaunt, with a limping gait, a creature that resembled a sick coyote far more than an extraterrestrial being. This version appeared so often that locals called it the blue dog. Where, then, is the truth? Are there two chupacabras, or only one? What stands out is this: two completely different forms, yet both fueled by the same idea, the fear of something unseen, draining life from the world. The archetype of the chupacabra does not belong to wild beasts or demons. It belongs to the modern anxiety, the fear of an age where science and media create more questions than answers. The Puerto Rican chupacabra is the collective imagination reacting to an unexplained world. The Texan chupacabra is the mind completing an image filtered through grainy footage and half-true reports. To hidden lore, the chupacabra is not a story about what kills livestock, but a story about how humans create monsters, when no existing language can express a new kind of fear. Monsters are not always born of nature. Sometimes they are born of repetition, of stories retold incorrectly, exaggerated, or half seen through a lens. And as this two-faced creature opens the path, American folklore shifts once more, returning to shapes that are half human, half beast, but no longer living in deep forests or swamps. They stand on bridges, beside rail tracks, in places where people pause before choosing a direction. There, the monster is not just a creature, but a guardian of dangerous crossroads. As the tale moves beyond creatures reborn through media, American folklore enters a stranger domain, the realm of those who stand guard where humans must pass, places where the border between safety and danger narrows to the width of a single step. Here, monsters no longer wander forests or follow travelers along winding trails. They wait, they remain still, as if the structure of the landscape itself summoned them. In Kentucky, where an old railway bridge stretches across a narrow ravine, people whisper about the Pope Lick monster. No single description ever agrees. Some say it wears the head of a goat, others claim a human torso with animal legs. Some swear it wields an axe, others insist it only stands there. But every account shares one truth. It lures people onto the bridge, a place with no escape when the train arrives. This creature does not hunt, it does not chase, it only needs a whisper, a cry mimicked from a familiar voice, or a tone that calls a name in the dark. Those who step onto the bridge are not attacked, they are placed at a moment from which there is no return. From an archetypal view, the Pope Lick monster is one of the clearest forms of the threshold keeper, a guardian of passage where those not fully aware must pay the price. Farther northeast, in the dense Maryland woods, another legend stands in a similar shape, yet carries a different spirit, the Maryland goatman. If the Pope Lick monster belongs to the whisper, the goatman belongs to consequence. People say he was once a scientist working in an animal research facility, twisted into a half-goat form by a failed experiment. Though its origin is modern, its role is ancient. It appears along lonely back roads, near places where young people often gather. Its legend does not warn against the wilderness alone. It warns against carelessness, against those liminal spaces where people believe they are safe while standing on the edge of real danger. Both the Pope Lick monster and the goatman are not monsters of pure nature. They are monsters of the crossroads, the meeting of railway and ravine, of science and accident, of thrill-seeking and unseen peril. They do not attack out of instinct. They appear at the exact moment a person is about to step wrong. Within Hidden Law's archetypal system, these threshold beings hold a distinct role. They embody missteps, the fragile, decisive moments when one step can alter a fate, not enemies, not demons, more like warnings carved into the landscape and given shape through legend. And from these guardians of the threshold, the story moves toward a more familiar yet deeper class of creature, small figures dwelling in the woods, both hidden and unmistakable, carrying the temperament of ancient earth, beings long believed by indigenous cultures to exist alongside humans, nearly invisible, yet never absent. Leaving behind the guardians of the threshold, American folklore opens into another realm, the world of small beings, whose size hides a striking potency. In many ancient cultures, especially across Europe and Asia, little people are a familiar part of myth. But in America, nestled in the deep forests of New England and on the far islands of Hawaii, these beings change shape with the land itself. Each region grants them a different temperament, from dangerous to gentle, as though the landscape decides the nature of its creatures. In the dense woods of Massachusetts, the Wampanoag speak of the Pukwudgie, a creature only a few handspans tall, with grey skin, sharp ears, and eyes that gleam like wet charcoal. It is no charming figure from children's tales. The old stories say the Pukwudgie was once friendly to humans, but misunderstandings and conflict soured the relationship. Since then, It has become unpredictable, sometimes helpful, sometimes mischievous, sometimes harmful without warning. That volatile nature gives the Pukwudgie the archetype of the capricious trickster, a being that can be both ally and threat. It may guide travelers with floating lights, yet those lights can just as easily lead them astray, deep into forests, where the night hangs thick and the way back dissolves. The New England woods, damp, dim, and threaded with winding paths, are the perfect setting. The Pukwudgie needs no great strength. It only needs to make humans believe in the things they already imagine. In complete contrast stands the Menehune of Hawaii. On the islands of Kauai and Oahu, they are remembered as small, gifted builders who work only at night, disappearing before dawn. Ancient fish ponds like Alikoko and long stone walls stretching across valleys are attributed to them, hints of a hidden people who once lived harmoniously with the land before retreating into the mountains. Their archetype is the hidden craftsman, a symbol of ingenuity, skill, and deep connection to the earth. They do not play tricks or cause harm. They keep their distance, working in silence, like spirits preserving the memory of an older world. If the Pukwudgie is the shadowed breath of New England's forests, the Menehune is the quiet heartbeat of Hawaii's mountains. Yet despite their differences, both share a defining trait. They live alongside humans without asking to be seen. This subtle presence marks them as beings belonging more to the land than to humanity. They are expressions of each region's identity, echoes of ancient life still lingering within the modern world. And from these small figures, American folklore slides into yet another dimension, a place where creatures are not only tiny but so ambiguous they shatter all familiar patterns. In that territory, monsters neither build nor play tricks. They exist as moments of pure strangeness, flickering between darkness and artificial light, where time and reason cease to cooperate. Some creatures have clear forms, some leave footprints, howls, or curses. But there is another territory in folklore, a place where every rule stretches thin and logic begins to sway. Here, monsters are not quite creatures. They resemble events, brief fractures in the surface of reality. People describe these encounters with a light-sounding phrase that carries enormous weight: high strangeness. These moments do not last. They do not repeat. They simply happen, leaving behind questions far larger than any physical form could ever answer. One of the most famous stories in this realm unfolded in Dover, Massachusetts. On a spring night in 1977, 4 teenagers, none of whom knew one another, witnessed the same figure within a span of less than 24 hours. They described a small creature with a thin body, a large round head, pale peach-colored skin, and eyes as black and glossy as wet coal. It had no clear mouth, no fur, no resemblance to any local animal. It simply stood there, between the glare of headlights and the shadow of trees, as if it had stumbled into the wrong world. The Dover Demon, as it was later named, never attacked. It made no sound. It left no trace. It only appeared, watched, and vanished. That alone made it a perfect emblem of high strangeness. A creature needs no evidence to unsettle the mind. The moment of seeing it is enough to shake the foundations of certainty. A few hundred miles west, another legend carries the same spirit but in darker hues: the Melonheads of Michigan and Ohio. The stories claim they were once children deformed by secret experiments, large heads, small bodies, moving in groups through wooded edges of small towns. But others insist they were never children at all. They only resembled children, as though caught between humanity and something unfinished. Their place within high strangeness comes not from appearance, but from their timelessness. The tales have no clear chronology. Some say they emerged during wartime, others place them earlier. Still others claim sightings as recent as the early 2000s. But every account shares one truth: they do not belong here, and each appearance only deepens the uncertainty surrounding them. The archetype of the Dover Demon and the Melonheads does not align with forest monsters, threshold guardians, or sorrow turned to shape. They belong to the anomaly, the category of beings that force humans to question not just what they are seeing, but the structure of reality itself. Moments of high strangeness unravel the sense of stability. No answers, no specimens, no storyline, only pure, disorienting mystery. And from this ambiguous realm, American folklore shifts into another kind of creature, not timeless, not deformed, but illogical. Beings for whom every biological rule fails, where the body is no longer a limit but a faint suggestion of something larger brushing against the human world. After the moments of high strangeness where reality bends in a single breath, American folklore shifts into a realm even harder to explain, the realm of creatures whose bodies defy every biological pattern. If the Dover demon makes people question perception, these beings make people question the very idea of a body. They seem assembled from pieces that should not fit together, parts that should never coexist, yet they move with an unsettling, effortless coherence. One of the most striking examples surfaced in the early 1970s in the small town of Enfield, Illinois. Witnesses described a creature with 3 legs, standing no higher than a grown adult's waist, with glowing pink eyes and a jerking gait, as if it had to choose its direction anew with every step. They called it the Enfield Horror. Its absurdity lay not just in its anatomy, but in how it interacted with the world, leaving deep impressions as if it were impossibly heavy, yet leaping forward with unnatural lightness, emitting sharp screeches, yet vanishing too swiftly for anyone to follow. No two descriptions matched perfectly, yet all carried the same sensation. This was not a creature belonging to a stable physical world. Though its appearances were brief, it left behind the feeling that something half-formed had passed through something, testing out existence, as though undecided about what it wanted to be. Farther south, in the Scape Ore Swamp of South Carolina, another creature appeared, with a clearer shape, but no less absurd: the Lizard Man. Witnesses described it as more than 2 meters tall, with dark green scales, rough skin, red eyes, and 3 sharp-clawed fingers. It resembled a reptile in every detail except one. It walked upright like a human, moving with strength far beyond any known animal. Lizard Man gained notoriety when vehicles were found scratched, dented, or torn with a force beyond what common wildlife could manage. But the most striking aspect was not its behavior, it was the consistency of the impossible. No one expects a reptile to evolve bipedal posture. No one expects a scaled creature to bear a human stance. No one expects such a being to exist until multiple people describe it the same way. The archetype behind the Enfield Horror and the Lizard Man is the impossible. Other beings that do not fit biological maps, nor psychological dimensions like the wolf woman or the wampus cat. They reside beyond human prediction. When reason fails to categorize them, fear takes a new root. The fear of being unable to understand the world at all. These illogical beings reveal that folklore is not only born from darkness, from human error, or from sorrow. It is also born from the fracture point of logic, where the stable suddenly becomes as soft as wax. And once logic breaks, nothing is more unsettling than a human-like face smiling in the dark with no meaning anyone can grasp. From this irrational territory, the story shifts toward beings even closer to human shape, yet furthest from humanity, faces that smile from the shadows, carrying the breath of pursuit. As illogical creatures shake the foundations of certainty, American folklore drifts toward a threshold more unsettling than towering beasts or mountain howls. Monsters with human faces, not twisted limbs, not claws, but the most familiar feature of all, the face becoming a vessel for something the human mind cannot translate. In the quiet outskirts of West Virginia, in the 1960 seconds, people spoke of a presence defined almost entirely by its smile. They called him the Grinning Man. No fangs, no distorted features, only a tall figure in a dark suit, a smooth, expressionless face, and a smile that stretched just a little too far. A smile that did not shift when he spoke, did not fade when he stood still, and somehow lingered even after he left the witness's sight. The grinning man was often seen along dim, empty roads, in places where pedestrians already felt watched. Some stories claim he did not walk, but glided, as though pulled forward by an invisible thread. Others say he knew the witness's name without introduction. Yet the most haunting part was not his speech or his movement, but the indifference of his smile, as if the human face was only a mask worn by something not quite human. His archetype is the unsettling human, a being whose familiar outline triggers an instinctive recoil. His smile does not convey joy, it conveys dissonance, like a sound warped through a damaged speaker. Not far in spirit, though distant in geography and meaning, stands the legend of the Bunnyman of Virginia. Unlike the quiet eeriness of the grinning man, the Bunnyman embodies a more chaotic disturbance. Witnesses tell of a man in a white rabbit suit appearing near narrow bridges at night, wielding an axe or sharp tool, striking cars, and threatening passers-by. Though the earliest accounts hint at criminal origins, the tale quickly slipped beyond realism and entered the realm of symbol. The rabbit, an emblem of innocence fused with a weapon, an emblem of violence. Joined together, they create a creature born not from behavior, but from the discord of imagery. Both the grinning man and the bunnyman stand between worlds, not fully monster, not fully human. They tap into a universal fear, encountering something almost human, yet unmistakably wrong. The psychological term is the uncanny valley, the place where familiarity bends just enough to tighten the heart. These faces mark a pivotal moment in American folklore, the migration of monsters from deep wilderness into urban memory, from natural darkness to social darkness, from the fear of being hunted to the fear of being observed. And once fear has taken the shape of a watching face, folklore leads us toward two opposing forms of spirit, one that warns, one that guides like twin shades of a memory still lingering on American soil. After the watching faces, those creatures closest to human shape, American folklore splits into two opposing paths. One leads toward the shadow of bad omens, the other toward a quieter tenderness, where the monster stands not with danger, but with humanity. These beings do not live in wild forests or abandoned railways. They live in collective memory, shaped more by the emotional life of a community than by the landscape itself. In Detroit, this spirit takes the name Nain Rouge, the Red Dwarf. People say that before every major catastrophe, great fires, riots, economic collapse, the Nain Rouge appears, not to cause disaster, but to foretell it. Descriptions are consistent: small, red-skinned, with a wrinkled, childlike face, and eyes glowing like burning coal. The Nain Rouge does not attack, it does not inflict harm, yet its presence freezes the air, like the sky shifting color before a storm. The city has lived with it so long that the omen has become part of Detroit's identity, a symbol woven into the story of a place familiar with upheaval. Its archetype is the omen bearer, not a monster, but a vessel for collective anxiety, a face onto which a city projects fears larger than any individual life. In a place shaped by cycles of struggle and resilience, the omen becomes a language for tension rising beneath the surface. But some legends move the opposite way. In the small towns of Connecticut and New York, people speak of the Green Lady, the spirit of a woman who vanished in a swamp generations ago. The story says she never left the place where she last lived. Yet instead of spreading fear, she became a guide. Travelers lost in the woods sometimes report seeing a faint figure in a pale green dress, shimmering like mist, standing just far enough away. She does not speak, she does not gesture, she appears where the safe path begins. Those who follow her shape say they always find a way out sooner than expected. The Green Lady embodies the archetype of the gentle shade, a spirit formed from loss, yet carrying compassion. Her legend is not about vengeance or warning, but about the tenderness that remains when love has nowhere else to go. If the Nain Rouge is a memory of a city's wounds, the Green Lady is a memory of devotion, a reminder that not every lingering soul stays in anger. Opposite in nature, yet linked in purpose, these two entities show that folklore does not only rise from fear of wilderness, it rises from what people feel about their own communities. Sometimes, monsters are simply the way collective memory speaks truths that cannot be said aloud. And from these spirits shaped by emotion, the story returns to larger, older presences, beings that do not merely watch or warn, but stride through mountains and forests as though they are part of the earth itself. Here, presence is no longer gentle. It carries the weight of primordial power, leaving behind the gentle spirits born from memory. American folklore turns toward the opposite horizon, the towering silhouettes, beings so large that they do not walk upon the land, they make the land tremble beneath them. Here, monsters are no longer omens or murmurs. They are force, mass, the weight of nature, given a human outline. These stories do not speak of subtlety. They speak of primordial authority, the kind that made early peoples feel small long before the first houses were raised. Across the frozen breadth of Alaska, where snow seals the stone for months at a time, the Athabascan people tell of Urauli. Unlike the cruel giants of European folklore, Urauli is gentle at times, helping lost hunters, at times simply standing atop cliffs as if part of the sky itself. Its tall, calm figure against the grey horizon gives it the archetype of the ancient guardian, not a monster, but a symbol of time, older than human memory. But in that same northern world, a giant can take on the opposite form. Among the Cherokee, stories speak of Chuitsi, sometimes called Zoids, a towering, fur-covered man-eater with eyes burning like embers. It does not watch, it hunts, it devours. The legend tells that Tsuitsi once ruled an entire mountain region, forcing villages to unite against it. The story's end is not heroic triumph, but fire, the only force humans possessed that could challenge its overwhelming scale. When Tsuitsi was burned, the wind scattered its ashes, but the memory of its threat remained for generations, carried in the people's stories like a warning. Between these extremes, protector and destroyer, American folklore keeps yet another giant, one almost impossible in form, the Flying Heads. In the Adirondacks and Iroquois lands, tales describe enormous disembodied heads drifting through the night, their long hair trailing like dark roots, their mouths wide enough to swallow a person in a single breath. They have no bodies, no limbs, only hunger, an endless appetite like a severed spirit seeking to consume the world to replace what it has lost. Their archetype is the disembodied hunger desire beyond physical boundary, instinct unrestrained by shape. In many versions, the Flying Heads arise after great human wrongs, greed, betrayal, the destruction of nature appearing as consequences sent by forces far older than mankind. What unites these giants is not size, but weight of meaning. They are the bodies humanity gives to forces beyond control. Mountains, storms, famine, the sheer endurance of the natural world. They are reminders that the earth existed long before humans and will exist long after. And from these colossal figures, folklore shifts once again, not toward greater strength, but toward a strangeness beyond the planet itself. Beings not of forest, soil, or stone, but of some far-reaching place beyond the sky, carrying the sense that this world is only a small corner of something far larger. While the echoes of giants still tremble across the mountains, American folklore turns sharply toward another frontier. No more heavy footsteps upon the ground. No more eyes watching from the forest's edge. This time, fear does not rise from below or approach from the sides. It descends from above, from a sky so vast that humanity becomes a single, faint mark against an endless, shifting darkness. And in that immense expanse, beings with no roots in American soil step into legend. One of the clearest accounts surfaced in 1973, along the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. Two men fishing at night saw a pale blue light sweep across the water. What emerged afterward resembled no creature that had ever walked the earth. It had a tall, narrow body, skin like muted metal, and three long appendages shaped like limbs, but not truly arms or legs. Its fingers closed like clamps, and its face lacked black or white in the eyes. Instead, it bore a smooth, featureless surface, as if expression itself was unnecessary. They came to be known as the Pascagoula entities. They did not roar, hiss, or communicate. They simply approached, slow and weightless, placing their appendages on the men's shoulders, as though examining an unfamiliar object. When the light withdrew back into the sky, the men were left with a realization. The encounter had not felt violent. It had felt like being studied by intelligence, not instinct. Their archetype is the extrinsic intelligence, a form of existence neither opposed to humanity nor aligned with it, not benevolent, not malevolent, simply other. If the Pascagoula entities carry the cold breath of distance and technology, another being found a continent away moves in gentle, surreal silence. The Fresno Nightcrawlers of California, captured in a handful of nighttime videos. They lack any recognizable anatomy. Two tall, white legs, walking softly across grass, with the fluid ease of flowing water. No head, no arms, no torso, only legs, passing through the world, as if movement itself were their purpose. Nightcrawlers do not threaten. They leave no footprints, no scent, no disturbance. They appear in open fields, drifting like pale shadows, then vanish without altering anything around them. Their power lies not in danger, but in the dreamlike quality of their presence, as though a piece of sleep had slipped into waking reality. Symbolically, Nightcrawlers belong to the gentle, other beings that do not test or warn, but glide through human life as reminders that not all strangeness carries darkness. The Pascagoula entities and the Fresno Nightcrawlers differ in shape, context, and emotional weight, one clinical and distant, the other soft and surreal. Yet both speak to the same idea, the existence of things that do not share our history, things unbound by earth, water, forest, or mountain, the elements that shaped every other monster before them. When the sky becomes the stage, American folklore stops describing fear alone. It describes smallness, the human recognition of its scale against the infinite. And from that bottomless expanse, the story returns to the ground, to a realm deeper than any forest, wider than any valley, the dark waters, where the planet's oldest memories still hold a shape. Once the sky has opened its strange pathways, American folklore returns to something far more ancient: water. No element holds memory the way water does. It hides, devours, preserves, and keeps whatever falls into it. In deep water, darkness does not merely cover, it compresses, creating a pressure so heavy that even time seems to slow. And in that realm, monsters need no roar or red eyes to inspire fear. They only need to exist. Many Great Lakes across North America carry their own legends. Yet one family of creatures appears again and again. Long, gliding beings, sometimes like enormous serpents, sometimes like plesiosaurs from the Jurassic seas. Their shapes change little, but their homes trace the full curve of the continent. On the border of Vermont and Quebec, Lake Champlain shelters Champ. Boaters speak of a long neck rising from the cold water before sinking with a single strong ripple. Farther north, Lake Memphremagog tells of Memphrey, a creature much like Champ, but described as larger and gentler in temperament. Along the inland waterways of the U.S., other stories break the surface. In Chesapeake Bay, people whisper of Chessie, a swift, sinuous form that moves so smoothly the waves barely tremble. In Nevada's Lake Tahoe, the long shadow of Tessie slips through blue depths, avoiding not just human eyes, but sunlight itself. These creatures do not roar, They glide. Their motion is part of the water itself, slow, deep, leaving behind nothing but a trace of uncertain disturbance. Their archetype is the ancient serpent, not a beast to fear, but a symbol of immensity beyond human comprehension. But water tells stories of more than serpentine shapes. In the Hawaiian Islands, tales speak of mo'o water spirits that can take the form of women or stones. Mo'o are not destructive creatures. They are guardians of sacred ponds, streams, and pools. If disrespected, the water shifts. If honored, it grows still like a mirror. Their archetype is the sacred guardian, drawing boundaries between what may be touched and what must remain untouched. Far to the north, where water does not flow but freezes into dangerous sheets, the Inuit tell of Tizaruk, the Arctic sea serpent, long and sleek, with an animal-like head rather than a fish's. It is said to pull people beneath the surface without a single splash. Tizaruk carries the nature of the world it inhabits, cold, fast, and brutally honest in its danger. Not every water legend speaks of towering beasts. Some focus on creatures whose size becomes the source of mystery. In Indiana, the tale of Beast of Busco, a colossal turtle, became folklore after an entire town failed to capture it despite repeated attempts. In Kansas, Sinkhole Sam is said to lurk in a sudden chasm, appearing and disappearing before anyone can grasp its form. And perhaps strangest of all is the rumor of the Oklahoma octopus, an octopus said to live in freshwater lakes, something nearly impossible by biological logic. Yet impossibility only strengthens folklore, whether immense or small, benevolent or dangerous. All these creatures share the same essence. They give form to the terror of not seeing the bottom. Water is the mirror of an ancient fear, the fear of being dragged into a place where light does not reach. And when we rise from the deep, American folklore gathers itself for its final turn, toward beings shaped not by environment or landscape, but by human morality, where the monster is not an external shadow, but the sharp consequence of an internal shift. From the deep waters back to solid ground, American folklore reaches its final layer of darkness, the layer where monsters are not born from mountains, forests, or the sky. They are born from human beings. This is the final territory of folklore, where fear no longer looks outward but inward, toward the deepest chamber of the human spirit. The creatures here do not represent the unfamiliar. They represent what humans may become when they fall from their own boundaries. In the Cajun culture of Louisiana lives the tale of the Rougarou, a werewolf-like figure whose essence does not lie in fur or fangs, but in broken vows. It is said that anyone who violates sacred rules during Lent or betrays an important promise becomes a wolf creature, wandering the swamps for a year until the curse passes to another. Here, the monster is not a wild beast lurking in the trees. It is the shadow of a human who has lost honesty with themselves. This archetype is the moral transgressor, a being whose darkness comes not from nature, but from ethical fracture. Farther southwest, within Navajo tradition, stands a similar yet more deliberate figure, the Skinwalker. Unlike the Rougarou, who transforms through failure, the Skinwalker chooses the darkness. Legend says that to become one, a person must commit the ultimate act of betrayal, sever ties with community, and perform a grave taboo. In exchange, they gain the power of shape-shifting, most often into coyotes, wolves, or other creatures of the night. But the price is the soul. The Skinwalker no longer belongs to the human world. It crosses into another, becoming the corrupted shapeshifter, a symbol of the desire for power beyond moral limits. And in the north, where winter is long, as memory lies perhaps the most haunting legend of all, not because of form, but because of meaning, the Wendigo. Among Algonquin peoples, the Wendigo is the embodiment of endless hunger, born from brutal winters when starvation tested human bonds. A person consumed by greed or driven to cannibalism in despair is overtaken by the spirit of hunger, their body stretching thin, bones sharp beneath the skin, eyes hollow as frozen wells. But the Wendigo does not starve. It cannot be full. Its hunger is not physical. It is a symbol of devouring desire, the urge to consume, possess, and never stop. Its archetype is the consuming shadow darkness, not sent to test or warn, but to reflect the emptiness that can open within a human being. In these three legends, Rougarou, Skinwalker, Wendigo, we see what every other monster merely hinted at. Darkness does not live outside humanity. It lives within the architecture of the soul, forests, mountains, rivers, the sky. These are only stages on which humans face themselves. Monsters do not always come from distant places. Sometimes, they are carved from fractures within the self. And when the journey through these 20 realms of shadow ends, a quiet truth remains. Monsters exist not to frighten humanity, but to remind humanity of what it may become when it forgets the light that once belonged to it. And within the final mist of legend, one question lingers across time. If the darkness could speak, what would it say about us?